Hi, my name is Jarrett Struby, and I'm doing my Module 5. This is Understanding My Community for Ottawa Middle School. Um, so, starting off, some customs and traditions. We have moderate to low social economic status is a significant portion of the community. The community is also really engaged with sporting events, local sporting events, and there's a lot of 4-H, there's academics. Um, put sports again because these the people love all sorts of sports. So we have, of course, our sports in the school during the school year, and we have a lot of intramurals during the summer, spring, summer, and fall. Um, that includes like pee wee football for students uh, under seventh grade. Um, they're really engaged with academics. There's a lot of hunters. There's a lot of agriculture that happens around. Of course, we have a lot of farms. It's in the middle of a rural area. It's kind of a rural hub with a co-op and a grain elevator right there. Um, um, and church is a major feature for a lot of people in the community. Um, it is the population average education level is a little high because there is a local college uh, there in addition to a branch of the local community college. Um, a lot of people have technical training um, in fields that deal with railroad and transportation and agriculture. Um, and almost everyone, most people have finished high school. We don't have a large population of dropouts, though we do have that population there. The median age is 33.2 years. So not super young, but also not super old. It's about almost even split of a typical split of male to female, slightly more females than males. The major economic powerhouses areas of employment are Walmart, both for the store and the distribution center. American Eagle Outfitters for the distribution center there. Um, shipping, rail, um, overland truck, um, agriculture with the grain silo there, and the grain elevator and the co-op. Those are the primary um, employers in the community. Um, of course, that's not counting other retail and service industry, being right on 35 highway. Um, it is predominantly white with a small black and a small Hispanic population. Now, where do people get the information? How they communicate? Of course, we have our school website from the school end of things. There is one main newspaper, the Ottawa Herald, that comes out. I think it used to be the Ottawa Daily Herald. Now I think it's a weekly, and there's a newspaper for the elderly, for senior citizens. There are 4 radio stations. 3 of them are FM. One is AM. The AM station is a country station, um, and they also do local news, but that's pretty typical for AM stations. Um, we have a hits FM station. There's a Christian FM station, and then there is the uh, local university radio station. Um, most people, despite these avenues for news, tend to get most of their news via social media. So that's Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever they happen to be using. I know all of our kids use TikTok um, and Snapchat and not so much Facebook, but their parents primarily use parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. Uh, the older people tend to get a lot of their information via Facebook, unfortunately. Um, so social media is where people tend to get most information. But there is some good because some of our school stuff, our PTO is very active on Facebook, things like that. English is the primary language. We have very few people in the community that speak another language. Those who do speak another language, it's Spanish. Um, so what resources we have tend to be Spanish resources. Community groups that are impactful, of course, the school board, the PTO, the teachers union, um, all kind of intertwined, are a huge group. Of course, there are various activity families, so our sports families, our football families, our soccer families, our band families, our choir families, our drama families, 4-H families, FFA families. Those are big groups. The local library, Friends of a Library, is an impactful group. The churches are a major centerpiece for a lot of people. The Chamber of Commerce has a really big influence within the community. Of course, the Ottawa University has a big influence. Neosho County Community College has a branch in the community. The hospital is a cultural center, along with the other services, fire department, police department, um, and then of course there's the co-op, the farmer co-op. So leadership within this community, a lot of it comes from our school board, our superintendent, deputy superintendent, building admin, building leadership teams, the PTO, the teachers themselves, and parents and guardians, along with our elected officials. Um, so what are these characteristics? So these are people that are generally dedicated to Ottawa, and its people. Our superintendent graduated from Ottawa High School, went to a local community college, went to Ottawa University, was a teacher for several years at the high school, was a assistant principal and a principal at the high school for several years before he was the assistant superintendent for a couple years, um, and then became the superintendent of the school. So he's spent most of his educational career, including his schooling, in Ottawa. So he is a very big part of our community. Um, and that's a pretty common thread among people who have leadership within the community. But more important than having roots and ties to the community, they also are people who have experience. They have earned people's trust. Um, and they tend to be generous. Now that could be monetarily. They give to good causes. They buy Girl Scout cookies and Boy Scout popcorn, but they also tend to be generous with their time. They're willing to take the time to work with people, or give their time to help people, or just give them time to just talk with people and listen to people. So they tend to be very generous. So, what are the economic conditions? The median household income is $43,800 a year, which is below the national average. There's a 15, almost 16% poverty rate in the town. Um, about almost a fifth of the households in the community are single parent, primarily single mothers, but there are a few single fathers. Almost a third of the households in Ottawa are non-familial, so mixed family. So that's primarily college students. But on the flip side, most of our students have some way of getting to school. Either they live close enough to walk, they have a ride, they can take a bus. I can only think of a couple students, at least in the middle school, that might have their ability to get to school is questionable. The political structure, it is a conservative community. However, it is a community that is centered around the school, which tends to lean more towards the liberal side of things. Um, and that doesn't seem to cause too much tension. Um, they are conservative in values, but they seem to be willing to lean a little bit more liberally for their students' education. It is a traditional mayor with a city council structure to this city. There's this typical school board. There's the Chamber of Commerce, which has some political impact. Now, social tensions, most of them tend to be socioeconomic. Those who are on the higher end of the socioeconomic versus those on the lower end of the socioeconomic. Which there are way more people at the lower end than at the high end. So there's a lot of tension there. Education levels, we have some people who didn't go, either didn't finish high school or didn't really do any education outside of high school, versus those, because it is a college town, who have a college degree, at least, or some like a associates, if not higher. And then we have some tension between those who are older versus those who are younger, because especially within the community and how we allocate resources and what projects get done, a lot more stuff tends to happen for younger people than older people, and there is not a minuscule elderly population. So whereas some towns about the size of Ottawa will tend to put a lot of resources into making things better for the elderly community, Ottawa has chosen to make a lot more stuff available to the younger generation, at least recently, with a lot more parks, a lot more activities, a skate park, playground equipment, things like that, recreational uh, spaces for them, as opposed to a lot more stuff that is catering toward the elderly generation. There is, and of course, with any community, you have some political tensions, either conservative versus liberal, or Democrat versus Republican, or what have you. There's always going to be some political tension, but it's not a major feature in Ottawa, Kansas. So where do we get information? Of course, we have school board records, which are easily accessible. It's what most of the records that I end up accessing, mostly for my schooling. School and district handouts, census data is freely available. There are student surveys, parent surveys. There's testing data available, and of course, and the city council itself does minutes, and there are open records. Typical school district, typical city mayor power structures. Nothing too special within the community. The biggest multicultural issue is the lack of multiculturalism. It is a pretty homogenous community. It's over 90% white. The other 10% of the population is predominantly Black and Hispanic, and then it tapers off from there to Asian, various Asian ethnicities, and Native American. And English is the dominant language, as I've said before, and those who don't speak English tend to speak Spanish. I don't even know of any other languages besides English and Spanish. So I think that's the biggest multicultural issue, is the lack of multiculturalism. There's not a lot of cultures. I mean, there are some, there's a lot of German, a lot of Irish, a lot of that, but we are dealing with people that are second, at most, generation peoples, and so so we don't have a lot of cultures kind of represented strongly. We do have some of our Hispanic families that do bring in some other culture, but that's about it. How do we measure public opinion? Of course, we can always take surveys. Who's showing up to what? So who's coming to the football games, the basketball games, the volleyball games? Who's coming to parent-teacher conferences? Who's coming to board meetings? We're viewing board meetings now since all of our stuff is online.